Thank you so much for listening to Breadwinning Mums. We really appreciate your continued support over the last year, and we're happy to announce that we have published the Breadwinning Mums book. Yay! This book is based on the conversations from the Breadwinning Mums Season 1 episodes. It highlights the candid journeys of each mums, as well as a golden nugget of wisdom from their life's lessons. Now is the perfect time to give the gift of the Breadwinning Mums book to the special mums in your life or to yourself. No matter where you are in life, I'm sure the practical tips within the Breadwinning Mums book will help you take your lives just a little bit further. Limited copies available, so order yours now at breadwinningmums.com. That's breadwinningmums.com. Coming up next on the Breadwinning Mums.
And I didn't realise how absent a parent I was until I got home. After I'd unpacked my bags and I was home for good, my daughter Emily, who was about 9, asked her mum, Mum, can you take me to Letitia's place on Friday? I dived in saying, Ems, I'm back. I can take you to Letitia's place on the weekend. And Emily said, through the absolute innocent voice of a 9-year-old, nah, Dad, you probably won't be around. And it was that moment that I realised, whoa, I've invested in the wrong things. I need to absolutely get on the front forward and be part of my kids and their little lives and what they perceive to be really important, not what I incorrectly perceive to be really important.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Breadwinning Mums podcast. This is a place where we debunk the myths of working mums, cheer each other on, and show the world that you can be a mum and still pursue excellence in your chosen area of expertise. Today, we are so privileged to have Tim Curtis on the show. Tim spoke of his life journey, growing up as the son of a Special Air Service commanding officer, working and exiting the army with an MBA, consult in the UN through the 2005 Afghan Parliamentary Elections, all the way up to his current consultancy work and co-authorship of the Resilience Shield, and his next upcoming book, Building Resilient Kids. I know you'll enjoy this episode with Tim Curtis. Tim Curtis, welcome to the Breadwinning Mums podcast.
Hello, Jane. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure to have you on board. So, Tim, you're a man with so many accomplishments, both in a professional sense, personal sense. But I'd like to start with a very simple question. Mm-hmm. Who are you as a human, Tim?
I think I'm a very different person to whom I was 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, if you had have asked me that question, I would have said I'm an ex-SAS guy with an MBA. But I realised in saying that, and on reflection, that was both my role and my identity. And in the research that we've undertaken over the last decade, we know that having role identity fusion's a problem. So I'm still those things. I'm still an ex-SAS guy with an MBA. We've got our own podcast, The Unforgiving 60. I've co-authored a book, The Resilience Shield. I've written another book, Building Resilient Kids. We have our crisis management business. We have our leadership practice. I'm a parent of 3. I mean, all of those things are part of my identity, which I've diversified my identity portfolio. And maybe the good test of that is to work out, well, if someone bust into this studio now and said, you were never in the SAS or you actually failed your MBA, would you be really worried about it? And the genuine answer to that in pretty much anything that I've done, you use the word accomplishments, I don't know whether they're those or not, would be no. I don't mind. Take anything you want off me, but I just prefer you didn't take my kids off me. So, yeah, diversified identity, I hope. But my proudest achievement definitely is my 3 wonderful children, although most of the credit goes to their mother, genuinely so. I was absent for a significant period of their life, and I'm trying to claw that back now.
Yeah. How old were they when you started I think you were working overseas at the time?
Yeah,
Or
well,
was this
they
before
were
then?
they were 0 years when I was away in their life, and I say that genuinely. I missed the birth of my first child, Ryan, when I was serving in Sierra Leone for near on a year during the civil war in Sierra Leone in West Africa, and he came 4 weeks early, so I missed his birth. I
Mm.
made the births of the other 2 girls, Emily and Lucy, but then definitely I was an absent parent. And I say that with all honesty. I prioritised myself, my own professional career, over the lives of my kids and their priorities and their achievements. And I did that with some sort of warped sense of I'm doing it for them.
Yeah.
Like I'm getting a bigger business card, a bigger paycheck, a
Yeah.
better car. But clearly it's advantageous to do this for them. And this is kind of winding back the last decade to work out, no, I was doing it for me. The story I was telling
Yeah.
myself was for them, but in reality it was for me. So if I was to summarize all of that, I'm a much different person, and I prioritize the lives of my kids much more than I ever have in the past.
That's a really good reflection. And one of the reasons why I started the Breadwinning Mums podcast was because of that exact pull and push, right? You feel like you do want to perform in a professional sense and you want to provide for the family, but how can you actually do that in a way that is also mindful of your family and you are still looking out for them and be present for them? When did you shifted the way you think about that
Mm.
dynamic? How old were the kids and how old were you? And where were you in that professional tangent?
The kids were 13, 11, 9, around about that.
Mm.
And I'd realised that for the most part in those years I'd been absent. And there was maybe 2 things really. The first is me feeling incredibly homesick after living abroad away from the kids for a long period of time. And that homesickness was a recognition that, yeah, I miss them deeply. But the second thing was a bit more bumper stickerish. I read Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth, where he talks about ego, and I realised, whoa, a lot of the things that I do in life, a lot of the things I say in life, a lot of my interactions with other humans was my ego speaking, and that I needed to dissolve that ego to be a better human, to be a better father, to be a better husband. And so that's probably been the journey that I've been on for the last decade, and it's been really tough. It's quite difficult to step aside from ego, particularly remembering my first career was in the Special Air Service Regiment. The first word of the unit's name is special.
Special, yeah.
So it's been quite challenging, and it's definitely a roller coaster ride. And I kind of need to come back to certain touch points on occasions and think about, why did I say it that way? Why did I ask that question? Did I really want the answer? Or did I just ask the question so I could trump the answer?
Yep.
Yeah, that's been really quite challenging. But
Wow.
work in progress. I hope I'm muddling through.
Yeah. Wow. Thanks for sharing, Tim. That's an amazing insight. I'd like to take us back to the young Tim. What was he like?
Yeah, born to a military family. My father spent 35 plus years in the military. And so the young Tim was transient. There was one constant in my life, and that was social impermanence. We were constantly changing schools, neighbourhoods as Dad changed jobs. The concrete part in our family was my brother, who was always there. He's my best mate. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we were moving around. And the only person I knew at the new school that we'd just enrolled in was my brother. The only person I knew in the neighbourhood was my brother. And the second bit of concrete was my mum, who she wasn't a breadwinning mum. She was a mum who anchored the home life, which was important in retrospect because Dad, also being in the military, he had long periods of absence as well. And so Mum was that lover, carer, homemaker, and Dad was in and out as his professional life demanded.
Mm, that's excellent. And did you like that transient life or did you hate it growing up?
It's all I knew. I mean, there are occasions when I was at a location, I knew I was leaving. I had a strong group of friends. I hated the idea of leaving. I do remember leaving a primary school in Western Australia. My father was the commanding officer of the SAS, coincidentally, and so we lived inside the barracks and went to one of the local schools, and I hated leaving it. It was not just the school, but the sports team that I was in. It was the group
Your
of
whole
neighbourhood
life, yeah.
kids. It was the neighbourhood itself and all of the infrastructure. And I remember driving across the Nullarbor, bawling my eyes out, not wanting to leave.
Mm.
And we have actually done some reflection and some research on geostability and whether it builds resilience or not. And on the subject of that, it's inconclusive. There is some theory that portability can build adaptability, certainly in the social domain, but there's some theories that stability in your geography, of course, improves your social connection. It gives you a closer group of friends and ultimately colleagues. So I didn't really know too much different, but I found that there was some simple tools and techniques that you could apply. The first was as my parents were unpacking the house, already up and down the street, knocking on doors, asking that question, hey, have you got any kids? And trying to create some
Yeah.
form of social connection. And generally that was done over a sporting apparatus of some description, whether it was a basketball, a football, a cricket set, or the pool in the backyard. And the second one was through the Trojan horse of sports, largely organised sports for me, team sports, although I did some individual sports as well, including swimming. Both of those things became really important in my life, who was in my neighbourhood life and who was in my sporting life. And they assisted that transition to new location, to new school, to new neighbourhood.
When did you know you were going to join the army as a son of an SASCO?
Yeah, well, believe it or not early. I originally in my high school years was thinking perhaps I want to be a teacher, and then I went through this phase of wanting to be a lawyer.
Mm.
And then, of course, Top Gun came out. I thought I'm going to be a fighter pilot. And so I applied thinking I'm going to go and be F-18 fighter pilot. And I received a scholarship to the Australian Defence Force Academy, albeit I'd applied for the Army. And then I changed my mind thinking I'll be a helicopter pilot. 6 weeks in, I decided, no, I don't want to do any of those things. I just want to be an infantryman. And through my subsequent years, I just became more and more motivated to go and do this thing called Special Air Service Selection Course. I wanted to serve in the SAS regiment, to challenge myself, to maybe be in a location where there are some inspiring people that have phenomenal resources. And so that's the path I took.
Yep. And how long were you there for?
I spent 16 years in uniform and then around about a decade of that in and out of the Special Air Service Regiment. And I led at, 3 corps levels, the patrol level, so around about 4 to 6 people, then the troop level, 20 to 30, and then squadron level, 100 to 120. And each of those had their unique challenges, but an incredible organisation, one that you always regret leaving, but one that there's some inevitability in leaving as well.
Mm.
Unbelievable time in uniform and certainly incredible time in that specific unit.
Yep. What made you decide to leave in the end?
Well, again, if I'm honest, it was probably a dose of selfishness. I just got the MBA component to the ex-SAS guy with an MBA, and I had this yearning to be in business. I felt like I'd done everything that I really wanted to do in terms of my military service. There was nothing else on the horizon that was super attractive for me in uniform. And I thought I'll go and apply this MBA. And then interestingly, I didn't do that. I got a email from a guy who was looking for people to come and consult in on the 2005 Afghan parliamentary elections. And that's what I did. I went for the year of 2005 to bring democracy to this country called Afghanistan as one of the principal planners on that parliamentary elections program, which was in itself an incredible year of transition, amazing group of people. It was a recognition that there are some unbelievable people outside of military uniform. And it probably set up what I was going to do next, which was to, apply the MBA inside a commercial organisation that was still working in this post-conflict world.
That's amazing. What was the personal and professional takeaway from your time there, advising the institution of democracy in Afghanistan?
Yeah, look, the big one, unsurprisingly, was all about the people, the internationals that were giving their time, and the UN's not a massive payer, so they weren't there for financial incentives. A lot of them were there because they believed in the architecture of democracy. You know, that's thing one. But more importantly, the Afghans that were committed to the process, there were some unbelievably inspiring young Afghans, including one guy, Abdullah Ahmadzai, who was the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer. He was in his early 30s, but super driven and motivated for Afghanistan to be part of some democratic structure. They every day you walked into a compound and they uplifted you. It was incredible that they wanted this such profound change for their country, that they believed in the country, that they loved the country, they loved the people. Yeah, so that would be my major takeaway. The second one was the concept of complexity, that even though on surface value none of Afghanistan wanted the Taliban around, or very few of them, so therefore you'd think that a democratic structure would be easy to implement, but it was not. At 441 districts, we had to fight to convince the Afghans that this system was good for them, and then the challenges of implementing an election and then sustaining democracy. Arguably the easiest thing was getting people to vote, although that was incredibly difficult in a society that was largely illiterate. But sustaining democracy, we know how that went in the 20-odd years after the parliamentary and the presidential elections.
Do you think that the US is at risk of losing their democracy? Going on a bit of a tangent.
What did Winston Churchill say? That democracy is the worst form of political system except all the rest. So what's the alternative would be the question. If I was to answer your question with a question, where else would they turn? But it's a chance. I think it's a remote chance. The likelihood that presidents could serve terms ad infinitum, that there could be no end to a president's term, is difficult to get your head inside. And that's because the US democracy, like all good democracies, is grounded in constitutional behaviours and actions and law, which makes changing those incredibly difficult. So I'd be confident that the democracy itself would preserve the democracy.
Yeah. There's a silver lining there, hopefully. And so after that stint, you went on to head some of multi-million-dollar firms in Dubai. What was that transition like?
Yeah, after my time in the UN, I linked up with a guy who I'd met actually in military service over in Sierra Leone in West Africa. He'd started his own business. He said, "Hey, I'd like you to come and work with us." He created a role for me, and that's where I ended up. And I spent 10 years in Dubai. My whole life was there. Everything, apartment, car, banking, insurance, you name it. And it was home. And leading the teams in business in post-conflict environments was in many ways a really easy fit for me. I'd done the MBA, I'd spent time in Afghanistan, so clipping on other post-conflict countries and pre-frontier markets, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Afghanistan and Iraq and many others was not super difficult. It was just about getting your head into how commercially does it work. And so I enjoyed that immensely, my time in Dubai. And the thing that brought me home after 10 years was that homesickness, this real sense of hollowness that my life here isn't a real life. My family's back in Australia, including at the time my aging mother and father, my brother, and of course 3 kids and wife. And so, yeah, I really, really wanted to go home. And I didn't realise how homesick I was until I got home. And I didn't realise how absent a parent I was until I got home. And maybe if I could share one vignette that was a real tipping point for me, after I'd unpacked my bags and I was home for good, my daughter Emily, who was about 9, asked her mum, Mum, can you take me to Letitia's place on Friday? I dived in saying, oh, Ems, I'm back. I can take you to Letitia's place on the weekend. And Emily said, through the absolute innocent voice of a 9-year-old, nah, Dad, you probably won't be around. And it was that moment that I realised, whoa, I've invested in the wrong things. I need to absolutely get on the front forward and be part of my kids and their little lives and what they perceive to be really important, not what I incorrectly perceive to be really important.
Thanks for sharing that vignette. I think I've heard that you shared that story in the Unforgiving 60 as well. Funnily enough, I actually moved here from Indonesia when I was 12, and my parents were still running their own business back in Indonesia. So I was living away from them from the age of 12. And even though we live in different countries, for me, at least at the time, it didn't feel like there was a disconnect. But looking back now as a parent, I think there were a lot of gaps that they couldn't, feel as a parent. But just wondering from your perspective as a parent, when you said that you missed that first decade of your children's life, did you feel like there was a disconnect with your children? And how were you able to fill that gap from that moment onwards when you've decided that you are going to put your family as the first top priorities in your life?
It'd be easier to say no, there wasn't a disconnect, but yes, there was a disconnect. And in particular, in the life of my boy, who is the eldest, you interviewed Steve Biddulph. Steve talks about this rule of 7s when it comes to boys. 0 to 7, boys are about mum. 7 to 14, they're about dad. 14 plus, they're looking for a mentor. Well, in the 7 to 14 period where Ryan needed a dad, I was not there. So it was less about the girls. Arguably, it was easier for them because my wife Vicky was all about their little lives, their dancing and associated hair and makeup and competitions. But it was nearly Ryan that got spat out the side. She, my wife Vicky, couldn't be running 3 kids in different directions. So there had to be compromises, and generally that happened on Ryan's side, and it was because I was an absent father. So, yeah, I think a big impact on him. In terms of how have I reinvested in their life to try and claw back some of those things that I neglected, well, it really started with the simple things. If any of my kids from, early teen years beyond needed to be taken anywhere, I dropped everything to go and do that. I think I watched every single sporting carnival, dance competition until my girls said, stop coming to dance competitions. You're too loud, you're too vocal. And I think maybe one of the really nice things, although she didn't mean it as being nice, came from my youngest daughter, Lucy, who said, Dad, stop telling us you love us, Dad. Stop hugging and kissing us so much, Dad. I think that was maybe the proof that, maybe I was just getting through a little bit. So, since that time, it's the 15-minute run to the friend's place, I'm there. The call at 11 o'clock at night that they'd had enough of a party, I'm there, no questions asked. So just trying to make those little meaningful contributions to build up the quantity of time that I didn't have, and maybe also just trying to finesse a little bit on the quality of time.
How do you do that? And I understand, I think with each child, it'll be different depending on their own personalities and, you know, what lifts them up. But if there was one common theme that you can share, how would that be?
Yeah, well, it becomes a little easier when they crest into teen years and have their own interests. Then you can connect on that basis. The quality of time can be all about the things that they're interested in, that maybe you've got some knowledge or wisdom. And so for my boy, he got interested in dimensions of business quite early, you know, crypto, stocks and shares. He ultimately went on to do a commerce degree. And so a lot of our connection was around that. And in actual fact, I had phenomenal fear of missing out on one in one period in his life where he started a little crypto portfolio. My brother had a crypto portfolio and they were constantly talking about crypto. And I had no idea what is this crypto and how do you do it? And so I had to immerse myself into it to just try and understand what are you doing here, and of course create that level of connection. And for the girls, it was more about just being available for them. I'd echo Steve Biddulph's thoughts when he says that all of our kids just need to feel safe and loved. And hopefully I just presented myself as someone who made all of my kids, particularly the girls, feel safe, and all of my kids feel loved.
Yep. That unconditional love, no matter what they do, no matter what they achieve or don't achieve.
Absolutely.
It's so important.
And the no questions asked on pickup, you know, when they crest into those teen years that you start to get a little worried about them, you know, they're going out to parties, and you're like, oh, I don't really want to preach because I know what I was like as a teenager. I arrived at this couple of rules. Thing one, when they were leaving the house, I always said, I love you, make good decisions. And then thing number two, I told them that if you feel uncomfortable in any situation, any circumstance, call me anytime and I'll come and pick you up, and there will be no questions asked. And those two things have been quite helpful. I still use it. My daughters leave the house, I say, make good choices. They always sing back, we will, Dad, we will. And there were more than one occasions when I got that 11 p.m. call at night and went to pick up one of my kids who were at a party, and generally they weren't having a good time because other kids had been drinking, maybe taking drugs, and had been mucking around, and they just said, I'm out. But they were never standing on the side of the road by themselves. There were always others with them who had also had enough. And so this pool of kids I'd pick up, and no questions asked, I'd drive them home. But interestingly, the no questions asked, I quickly realised you don't have to ask any questions. They're going to tell you anyway. So, yeah.
They're going to tell you when they feel like it's safe, which is what you've provided.
Yeah, well, maybe that's true too. I mean, I wasn't judging. I didn't care. I didn't care if one of the kids got in the car and they were obviously intoxicated. I think at the end of the day, we all just want our kids home safe every night. And if I'm a little part to get a kid home safe on that night and certainly get my kids home safe, then that's awesome. That's all I want to be doing.
Yep, that's awesome. When you had Steve Biddulph on the Unforgiving 60, he talked about having some time alone with one child at any one time. Were you able to do that with your kids, and how did that go?
Fortunately, yes. I've done it on occasions with my boy, embracing this wild spirit of man adventure. So, you know, going out, doing some backpacking, campfire of a night time. And interestingly, we come away with a bit of social connection. It changes the dimension because there's no screens, no television, no other distractions. But also, if it's a little bit challenging for boys, they feel their sense of achievement. And we, on one occasion, Ryan would have been maybe 11 or 12, we went for a 10K walk. we camped the night and we walked out 10 k's the next day. And I remember his friends asking him, "Oh, how far did you walk?" And he said 20 kilometres. And they're like, "Whoa, 20 kilometres." And I could see him puff up a bit, like there was this real
Yeah.
sense of achievement.
Yeah.
And for the girls, I've travelled with each of them independently.
Mm.
Emily came with me to England and Ireland when we were delivering some work some years ago, and her and I did 10 days travelling together, which was awesome. And, you know, one of the little pleasurable moments was driving in Ireland in the rain. You know, she'd put on a playlist and then I'd look over and she'd be asleep in the passenger seat. Like that little snapshot was just so rich. It fills my heart still to this day. And Lucy, we did the same, albeit in the US. So yeah, I've travelled with all of them and with each of them. Yeah. And I am a big believer, I write in the book, Building Resilient Kids, on this important transition, this rite of passage, and it doesn't need to be extreme physical components for boys or girls, but how are we signifying their transition from being a child to being an adult? And that's in some ways a method of doing it. Travel independently with each of your kids, or allow them the opportunity to travel with you. Perhaps have them pick the destination as well and the things that you want to be doing when you're there.
Was there any particular age threshold that you took them on?
Tried a few different ages. Too young, they don't appreciate it. I remember we did a bit of European travel with our kids when they were very young, and Lucy just wanted to go from country to country because of the gelato. Just want ice cream. Where's the next ice cream? So it probably is when they crest into their teen years, and importantly when they can understand differences, where you can build context and contrast. When they're in a location and they realise, oh, this is different to where I usually live, what I usually do. And that doesn't have to be an extravagant holiday location. It could be a bushwalk. So yeah, I think that's kind of the important time frame when they get this idea that there are differences, and they learn to appreciate those little differences for better and for worse.
Yeah. I love this one moment that you shared again on the Unforgiving 60 when you had Steve Biddulph on the podcast, when you shared the first moment that you hugged your dad as a result of Steve's amazing work. And that's translated to the thawing of, you know, the old version of masculinity in your family. And so I wonder, how did it influence the way you father your children before and after that moment of that first hug with your dad?
Isn't it funny? Because you'd never think that a simple book could change the trajectory of lives, multiple lives, but undoubtedly Steve's book, Manhood, changed not just my life, but a range of others. Let me explain. I read the book, and in the book he talks about the connection of, you know, brother to brother, brother to father, father to son, and the relationship between grandson and grandfather. And one of the important things is he says that, yeah, we're all yearning human connection and human touch, but, you know, boys, why aren't we doing it? Why aren't we applying a hug? So I thought, after reading the book, let me experiment. My dad, as mentioned, spent 35 years in the military. He was used to a crisp salute or a firm handshake. And after spending some holiday time with him, he was early in his retirement on an avocado farm. He went to extend his hand to say, you know, thanks for coming. And I ignored the handshake and just went in for the hug. And he stood there like a board.
Yeah.
It was nearly like, what's wrong with you? You know, you sick or something?
Yeah.
The next time I did the same. The next time I did the same. And then, unsurprisingly, every time after that, we hugged each other, kissed each other. And when my boy was interacting with his grandfather, they always hugged. It was just normal. Ryan never thought about shaking his grandfather's hand or even his uncle's hand. He always went in for the hug. And so that then started to reverberate. I was hugging my brother. We still do. I kiss my brother. He kisses me. And then my mates. I started hugging my mates, not the sort of bro hug that you see in the gyms. No, genuine double arm, bring it in,
Yeah.
heartfelt, with the linger. And one of my great mates, Steve Boyd, said that I taught him how to hug. He's a kid who
That's
had a
nice.
tough upbringing. He
Yeah.
was a tough kid, still is a tough adult. But yeah, he'd never had this experience of the hug. Now, if you were to see me and Steve, I'm not initiating the hug anymore. He's initiating the hug.
Mm.
And I'm hoping that a bit like, the stone in the pond as the ripples go out, he's now executing that with others in his life so that we can, to coin Steve Biddulph again, thaw out a bit. And I do
Yeah.
think that men are thawing out on the concept of connection with other men. And I think men are yearning for it too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, again, we talked about this in the workshop prior, but it releases oxytocin, right? And if you have small kids, it's such a really quick way of helping your little ones regulate their emotions. When they're upset about dropping an ice cream or something, just give them that hug and wait until their energy sort of calms down a little bit, and then they go on about their day again. It's so simple, but it's so powerful.
So powerful. And just even being available if they're not ready to be hugged, or they don't want to be hugged, or they've got that anger streak where they're going to push you away. Just knowing that you're available for them, that there is love and there's safety is critical. And also understanding, Jill Bolt Taylor's work, that an emotion lasts 90 seconds, less time in our little toddlers and waddlers. And so drawing their attention to the fact that that emotion is normal. We can sit with you in that emotion, but it will pass. And if you need me or your teddy or the dog to assist in regulating, that's great. That's awesome. Encourage them to find how they can self-regulate.
Yeah. Awesome. Which is a really great segue to your book. Tell us about your new book, Tim.
Book 2, Building Resilient Kids. And the origin of the book was all of the work that we did off the back of book number 1, which I co-authored with Dr. Dan Pronk and Ben Pronk, called The Resilient Shield. And it's an evidence-based model on how can we do resilience. What sits to a side of that is your ability to assess your own resilience through the Resilience Survey. And then we talk about layers of resilience: an innate layer, part nature, part nurture; mind layer, part mindset, and the importance of meditation, mindfulness practices; body layer, unsurprisingly, sleep, diet, and exercise; that social layer that we've been talking about, the importance of social support networks, family and friends, the people that are there for you and those that you're there for; the professional layer, which is all about competence and confidence, regardless of what you might write on your resume; and then adaptation, your ability to do things that you never thought were possible. Off the back of workshops, keynotes, camps and retreats, I got a lot of questions. It nearly sounded like this: so this is awesome, this is great for us, but what can we do for our kids? And it got me thinking, well, there's bookshops full of parenting books, but clearly something was missing the mark. We've always said that resilience varies by degree and not kind. That is to say, it's as relevant to your 6-year-old and 9-year-old as it is to you, Jane. But we apply techniques specific to age and stage. And so in Building Resilient Kids, I've explained that concept. I've also articulated what the risk factors are to diminished kids' resilience. Nearly you can identify these well in advance. Maybe I'll circle back to that in a little while. And then across innate, mind, body, social, professional and adaptation, how do we bring it to life for toddlers, for waddlers, for tweens, for teens? And one of the interesting things in looking at risk factors is physically we do a hell of a lot of screening. I mean, we're screening mums, we're screening babies in utero, heel prick test after birth. Then kids are doing their dental checkups. They're going to see the little doctors to big doctors. But we never screen for resilience, even though we know the risk factors, which has got me scratching my head asking why. If we know that kids depending on the way that they're born, depending on the way that they're raised, can have diminished resilience. Why wouldn't we test for that? And I'm not saying so that we can measure it, but so parents, carers, educators, coaches, mentors could do something about it, which is probably the next little phase in my life, is to work out how can we codify this concept. But yeah, it's been an awesome journey in writing the book, Building Resilient Kids. And actually, I'm sitting in the studio having just had a full day with the audio book. Day 2 happening today.
Perfect. And so this book, as you mentioned, is written for the village of the kids. So helping parents, teachers, coaches, uncles, aunties. If they could just take away 3 things from the book that they could implement to any kids at any stages in their life, what would that be?
That it is relevant by age and stage, and resilience is modifiable, that we should start as young as we possibly can without associating labels. In fact, the younger we start, the less that labels need to be applied. Let me give you 2 examples. If you meditate, your kids don't grow up watching you meditate thinking that's meditation. That's just what mum does. If you grow up eating well at breakfast, lunch and dinner, kids don't think of that as nutrition. That's just the way we eat. So the younger we can apply this, the less challenges we're going to have to get through a prickly label in order to try and apply a tool or a technique. And this is kind of the architecture of the book. Let's start as young as we possibly can with age-appropriate tools and techniques, and so they grow up, and all they need to do, having built a toolkit, is continue to apply it. And the other thing I'd say in terms of the major recommendation is to role model behaviours. There's a awesome body of research. Colloquially, it was called the Bobo doll by Albert Bandura, who ran an experiment where kids witnessed adults interacting with a doll. Its name was Bobo, and where adults were cruel to the doll, when they left the room and the kids were allowed to interact with the doll, they mimicked that behaviour. If adults were kinder or ignored the doll, kids mimicked that behaviour. So that Bobo doll experiment's been quite profound in the way that we must role model good behaviours. If you grow up with care and love in your family unit, with respect inside your school class, or a coach that really cares for you, you're likely to embrace that. It'll be one of the many coats that you start to wear. If the opposite is true, then that becomes your normal. There'll be the things that you start to apply in your life, and terrifyingly in the lives of others, and maybe the lives of your young ones when you finally have children.
Yeah. One of the genesis of your second book was also influenced by your wife's work in child protection. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. Hearing the stories that were coming back into the house on a nightly basis, and I'm telling you, even the good stories are bad, and the bad stories are horrific, scratching my head thinking, God, there must be a way that we can do this a bit better before kids are put in this circumstance where, actual example, mum rings child protection and says, come and pick my baby up because it cries too much. Like, that's a horrendous circumstance, but it's not abnormal. So how can we improve the outlooks of parents, but also if kids are, and they will terrifyingly and tragically continue to be placed in those situations, how can we bolster their resilience? Because we do know that even if a child develops post-traumatic stress disorder, and about 30% of kids are exposed to trauma, but relatively small amounts will develop post-traumatic stress disorder, it's not the end. The kids can, by applying resilience-building techniques, achieve post-traumatic growth. And we talk to those tools and techniques in the book, the little things that we can do, even if a child has been exposed to some of the worst trauma imaginable. And it doesn't matter whether it's physical or emotional abuse, or a school bus accident, or wider neglect, or absence of care and love, there are plenty of things that they can do for them, the kids. And it's never too late. I said we want to start early, but if they crest into their teen years and they haven't really applied tools and techniques, then it's not too late. And the reason why it takes a village is if there are absences or deficits from one part of a kid's family, well, we want to be able to compensate from that. So what are our teachers knowing about the concept of resilience? How are they bringing it into the classroom? Because they can. In the same way, the cool aunt or the funny uncle, the grandparents, the softball coach, they all have a role to play in order to teach these kids that even if things aren't going well for you inside the family home, then there are other locations, other outlets where you can build your resilience. But we can't do that unless there is knowledge transfer to teachers, to coaches, to mentors, to grandparents, to aunts and uncles, and the rest on, yes, let's instill these tools and techniques. Here's how you do it.
That's great, Tim. I think one of the main attraction for myself towards Resilient Shield model is the fact that it's multi-layered and you can dial up or down depending on what works for you at whatever stage you're on, and that each attempt at increasing that particular layer is directly adaptable to other layers. So it's not a full scale menu of what you have to do from A to Z, but just do little tweaks here and there and then try to improve yourself along the way on the other parts. So that's perfect.
Yeah, and there's that transferability and the fact that no layer acts in isolation. It's not like a layer of a cake. You can be doing a thing and affecting a number of other layers. You know, you go for a walk with mum and dad inside your local bush. Well, great. You've got a bit of mindfulness. You're doing a bit of the physical and, of course, the social connection. I tell a little bit of a story about Alir, the AFL footballer. Sudanese heritage, was born in a Kenyan refugee camp. He emigrated to Australia and he didn't know anything. He's not the colour of your typical Australian. Goes to school, discovers AFL, and he realises that the football is relevant but not super relevant. It's the community he finds in his football club. But there's the social part, there's the body part, which is encouraging him to do the sleep, diet, exercise a bit better, to build confidence and competence using the vector of football. And yep, you know the rest. He's a professional footballer, an inspiring human being. A great example of how no layer acts in isolation. He's found his tribe and he's applying that to build his resilience.
Yeah, awesome. In your Unforgiving 60 podcast, you've interviewed a range of Australians and other nationals who have achieved not just resilience, but a particular purpose in their lives. I think that makes them such beautiful human beings. And you spoke about having the need to go through a particular stress or adversity in your life in order to build that resilience. Have you observed any common theme in the guests that you have interviewed in your podcast, and what's made them so resilient and so purposeful?
That's probably exactly the summary, that they've all been through some stressor, some of them really quite profound stressors, including being abused as children, but others seek the stressor. You know, this is the Paul Bloom theory that there is no happiness without struggle. What's the struggle in your life? Through in overcoming the struggle, you build happiness. And in building happiness, that's perhaps teaching you a bit of that grit thing, the passion plus perseverance. Via Angela Duckworth, that they all embrace the struggle. I mean, take Harry Garside, professional boxer. He's doing ballet dancing, not because it helps with his footwork. That's not the reason why he took up ballet dancing. It just makes him feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that discomfort, on the other side of discomfort, is growth. This is the concept of Yira. Occupying a space that's bigger than you, that you know when coming through this stressor, that's probably a perceived thing, not a real thing, you'll achieve growth. Don't like public speaking? Do public speaking. Through that discomfort will be growth. The best performing public speakers, comedians on the planet, mostly are introverts. They don't like being up on stage. They've just done it and done it and done it to build a level of comfort in performing on stage, but they're still introverts.
Yeah. Yeah, you try to chat them up afterwards and actually quite awkward.
Yeah, very awkward.
Yeah,
I've got a few friends that are comedians, and one of my really good friends is a keynote speaker, and yeah, they can be challenging even when they're good mates.
Okay, great. So you grew up as an army kid, joined the army, worked for the UN, worked on $1 million firm out of Dubai, and now you are doing your work in resilience. Why do you do what you do?
It's probably a bit of a combination of all the things we've talked about. There's that passion part. I do find this brings joy to my heart, light into my life, the concept of applying some resilience in the world of leaders and being able to do it under pressure. That's called crisis management. And I find that very fulfilling to have a demographic, whether it's a corporate boardroom, whether it's a conference room, whether it's a conference centre, and just make little changes in people's lives through the way that you can explain them doing things a little better, applying the tools and techniques that we know are completely transferable out of elite pathways into normal life. So I do find that incredibly rewarding. And also the wide demographic with people that we get to work with. You know, we work with 20% of ASX 200, 15 of the top 50, but all the way down to little family-owned businesses, to network of farms in a pastoral company. And, you know, one of the wonderful things for us is a lot of our clients become our good friends, that we get so invested in who they are and what they're doing in their life that inevitably you wake up and you're like, oh, he's a friend, not just a client, but a true friend. And so that little collision of things is very rich for me.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I don't mean rich as in financial.
Well, if it can be both, then it's a win-win for everyone.
Perhaps.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tim, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. When can we expect to have your new book, your second book, available?
Building Resilient Kids is out for pre-order now, and it's in bookshops on the 1st of July 2025. Ebook and audio book as well.
Okay, perfect. And if there was just one thing that each parent, coach, teacher of a child can do before the book is released, what can they do?
I'd say build some self-awareness by going to resilientshield.com and doing the survey.
Yeah.
You won't be able to role model anything that you're not applying. So work out where your deficits are and do something about them. Learn the tools and techniques that can improve your resilience. And then when you pick up Building Resilient Kids, all I need to do is explain how you contextualize it to your toddler.
Yeah.
Do something for you first.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. Look forward to reading your book.
Thanks so much for having me.
See you then.
This episode of the Breadwinning Mums was produced by me, Jane Lim, and our theme music was produced by Sam McNally. We recorded this episode on the lens of Darug people who have passed their parenting story for generations. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and thank them for caring for country. Connect with us through LinkedIn or Instagram at Breadwinning Mums. Until next time.